Ladies, gentlemen, and Nightfarers of all ages, when it comes to success in Nightreign, generally speaking, we all have our own methods. There are some ways that the player base as a whole has just sort of accepted as being extremely easy and consistent routes to power every run, some that are more niche or quirky but could come in handy on occasion. But one thing that I think people are heavily undervaluing and underestimating is the passive effect dormant powers. Some of you might not even know what I mean when I use that term, but today we're going to dive fully and deeply into the passive dormant powers so I can talk about why I think they are good, why people should take them more often than they tend to, which ones specifically are strong, and then some extra special tricks and tips related to them as well. Starting off then, to be a bit more explicit with what I mean by passive dormant power, when you kill a boss, or sometimes certain chests that you open as well, you will spawn in an orb that you can interact with, and if you do so, you will get a choice between 2 or 3 options. Usually, most of the slots will be weapons that you choose between, and a lot of people put most of their attention from these on getting all of their weapon slots full with at least usable passives. But with that focus, sometimes people will fill their weapon slots entirely really early, then find more dormant powers that can offer even slightly better weapon passives, and then they just replace the weapons that they took earlier in the run. And if you keep doing that over and over, while yes, you are becoming more powerful than you were in the previous moment, what you are doing is casting away the choices you made early in the run. You are losing all benefit from your early dormant powers if you do it this way. The way that I tend to look at things personally then, is if you take a weapon early in the run from one of these, it should be something really solid, something that you really intend on keeping until the end of your run, unless you get super lucky. Or of course, if it's something that you will actually be holding and wielding in your hands actively, then that's worth it too. But don't always pick weapons from these before even thinking about the other options. Something like stamina recovery +4 may sound small, but this will let you improve your ability to dodge, it will improve your ability to do longer attack chain combos, and importantly, if you end up choosing this option again later in the run, it will stack, and stuff like this is importantly great for stuff like reviving teammates, which you might not think about when you look at the option. Unlike weapons, where if you pick a weapon as your power early and then replace it later in the run, the passive dormant power effects stay with you permanently for the rest of the run no matter what. And for an example of what I mean, I had a run where I got maximum HP increase offered on Guardian multiple times, and my health bar, as a result of this, was like half of this screen when I was in the final boss room. It is such a simple concept, but it pays off so hard if you actually respect the passive increases, even if they sometimes sound boring or small on paper. That said, while I view these statistical passive dormant powers as being absolutely worth consideration, they aren't the main thing that I wanted to talk about today. No, that would be the passive dormant powers that actually output damage themselves. This is things like Madness Explosion, the Flame of Frenzy while walking, a Violent Deluge of Star Rain while walking as well, Lightning Strikes when you dodge, even things like Summon Those Who Live in Death on guard counter or Holy Bursts on guard counter. These are all sources of extra damage that do not directly affect your weapon hits or your skills or your ultimate, nothing like that. They are pretty much passive, and for most characters they will just happen when they happen. And as a result, again, a lot of people don't put too much stock into them being good, but then you try them and you might find otherwise. Like these statistical powers, these often won't do a crazy amount if you just get one random effect and then have it go off occasionally, but if you get multiple of them, or if you lean into it, or if you get the right specific power for your situation, they can really just sort of go off and do a lot of good. A good example of this is periodic giant glint blades that spawn above your head for free. These, at least at level 15, do a pretty decent little chunk of damage. They build quite a bit of stagger, given that they are giant glint blades, and importantly, they don't cost you any FP when they spawn, they don't take you any time or effort to manage, they just appear occasionally while you're fighting, passively, and then fire at your target. It's basically just extra free damage that happens. Similar with lightning on dodge, you will dodge naturally when you're fighting difficult enemies, and especially if you have a melee build against a Night Lord, the lightning procs can actually end up being a decent chunk of damage over the course of the fight because you will do a lot of dodging, and the same sort of goes for all the different ones of these types of powers. Flame of Frenzy while walking, guard counter holy attacks, guard countered summoning attack, ice storm surge sprint, and while we're on the note of these types of things, even the more middle ground passives are definitely undervalued. Like increased invulnerability effect on dodge is an insanely strong passive in general that I often see people just sort of blitz let's pass and ignore. Same thing with increased health recovery from flasks. Yeah, maybe that sounds boring, but it's really, really good. And these are things that may sound boring compared to like, oh, that's one of the coolest weapons I remember from the game. But if that weapon is not something you're going to actually use, then these passives can be more powerful for you. All that said, let's get into some more specifics on how to get the most out of the system. First up, elemental weaknesses. Every enemy in these games has different elemental weaknesses and resistances, but while most enemies are pretty randomized in Nightreign, so you can't really plan for this ahead of time, you do, however, know what the Night Lord is going to be before the run begins. Every Night Lord has a specific element or ailment that just completely counters them. In some cases, it just does significant bonus damage and extra stagger buildup. For most bosses, these can also cause full extra flinches. For some bosses, they can have extra effects, like they can put a debuff on the boss that reduces their damage afterwards, or it can even just fully cancel otherwise deadly attacks on some of them. Point being, element weakness of Night Lord is super important to build into in general if you are trying to give yourself the best chance of success. But one way of doing this, outside of weapons themselves obviously, is through these passive dormant power effects. There are multiple Night Lords that are weak to holy damage. Maybe you're playing Guardian, working around your shield, and you get offered guard counters cause holy bursts. Now when you are fighting the Night Lord, any guard counter is followed by a holy damage burst, which is that Night Lord's elemental weakness, and that's actually quite good even if you don't find a full-on holy weapon in that run. Similarly, there is the Flame of Frenzy while walking effect, which you can use against Equilibrious Beast or Libra, who is weak to madness. The Lightning Dodge is super effective against Fulgor, the Dark Drift Knight, and you get the idea. These are easy, free ways to gain things that can counter a Night Lord's weakness without completely outbrooting the rest of your playstyle for the rest of the run. And there's even further ways to take this, like the Violent Deluge of Star Rain covers an area when it lands, which means, of course, against any enemy that is large enough to fill the whole circle, but slow enough to stand in it for the duration, it is much more powerful than it otherwise would be. All these things to say, these powers are all good. They're always just free bonus damage, basically, that sticks with you for the whole run, but sometimes in certain spots they can be extremely powerful, and they're definitely worth considering if you're in one of those moments. Then the final thing that I want to touch on is just a couple of tips for making these specific passives stronger, or even leaning into them completely. Each one has its own damage type, and boosting the damage type associated with them will increase the damage. Things like increased magic attack power will increase the magic damage done of the Star Rain from the Star Rain effect. So if you are already building magic damage in your build in general, and you are offered the power that causes the deluge of Star Rain anyways, it will be stronger than it normally would be, and similarly can be said for the other options too. The other main one is that while a lot of these passive dormant powers just sort of happen on occasion, one of them requires sprinting, which you won't do very often in combat because of the stamina cost, so that one does struggle a bit. But obviously the ones that trigger off of guard counters will work best with Guardian, but you can always run a shield on any other character and do the same thing as well. But the real trick is for the powers that say they summon things while you are walking, like the Flame of Frenzy while walking and Violent Deluge of Star Rain while walking. These two powers especially are best used by Iron Eye, Recluse, and Revenant above all else, and then Guardian secondarily, and then Executor also has a slight synergy with it too. The reason for this is that most characters, these trigger if you're like RP walking, so slow walking, or if you like drink a flask while moving, or if you use an item which also slows you to walk speed while you're moving. Iron Eye specifically, or realistically any character that you can use a bow with, if you two-hand the bow and then press the guard button, you will enter a full aim mode with a reticle on your screen instead of auto lock-on. While moving and doing this, you will count as walking for the purposes of triggering the passive power on repeat, but you also are able to fully keep up your standard damage output because you can be firing arrows the whole time. This makes these specific walking powers super free on Iron Eye to just make good use out of more so than anyone else. Guardian I view as being sort of second in that category though, is when he is in his Steel Guard, his special guard mode that is his passive ability. If he is moving while in that stance, it will also count as being walking speed and it will trigger these passives as well. And he is usually in melee range of the boss anyways, which makes them even more effective too, and of course this matters even more for Guardian because his general damage output will be lower than the other Nightfarers, so having damage output from specifically a passive effect like this is going to be a larger portion of your overall damage if you find it. Then as for why I mentioned Recluse and Revenant, when casting spells of any kind with a staff or a seal, if you are moving while doing so, you enter walking speed and so you will trigger these passives. So when using a casting build in general, general on any character, I guess, you can make good use of these walking effects. And then finally for Executor, it's specifically when moving around with your character skill active when you are holding the cursed sword in your hands, that does count as walking as well. Though generally speaking, this character won't spend too much time doing that. Usually if you have the sword out, you're actively trying to use it, but it's still worth mentioning when we're talking about the topic nonetheless. And on the note of things worth mentioning, there's also of course passives on weapons as well, and some of the passives on weapons that require you to have them in one of your actual main equipped slots are ones that can do damaging effects while walking as well, and these work just the same. They work with these characters, and I think that people undervalue them, so especially with the fact that you just have one of these effects in your offhand as the passive, I really do think that's a good idea too. That just about does it for today then, everyone. A talk about passive dormant powers and how I think they are generally way better than people think they are. These statistical passives are great for sure, they really can add up over a run, and the ones that create full-on effects are basically just bonus damage that you don't have to put much effort into at all. But then we also went over the ways to put more effort into them if you really want to lean into it, and that can help too. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and hopefully it makes your future expeditions even more enjoyable. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.